begin. Hello and good morning. My name is Ruth Cologne Wagner, and I'm the Senior Project Coordinator with the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, also known as NIAPRS. We're kicking off our Care Management Training Initiative, also known as CMTI, with a really important topic, effective outreach and engagement. Before I introduce our presenters, I do have a few announcements. Actually, not quite so few, quite a bit. But recently, we sent you numerous emails, one email for each activity that you have scheduled with us for the life of this initiative, which is 12 months. And so I received a barrage of emails, and I really do apologize for not giving you a heads up that those would be coming. Our computer system sends out one email for each activity over the course of the 12 months. And so that's why the care managers probably received about 5 emails back to back, and supervisors received a lot more than that. So I apologize for that. This presentation, you have a question, you'll see the question and answer box on the lower right-hand portion of your screen, or at least that's where mine is on the screen. And we want you really to feel free to enter your questions as use of them, as they come. And if we can answer them in a moment, we will. And if not, we will definitely organize all those questions and attend to them at the end or towards the end of the presentation. The question regarding the status of whether it's your own registration status or a staff member's registration status, I want you to please reach out to me directly. Is at ruthcw@niaprs.org, ruthcw@nyaprs.org. Also, if you have setting changes, whether you're adding people or removing people, ask that you reach out to me as well, and that will keep our registration list nice and active and current. For our grant to do this initiative from the Office of Mental Health, we have a pre and a post assessment that you will be taking, the pre-assessment now and the post-assessment next year after the end of the training initiative. So on your curriculum in the learning management system, and if you don't see it, I urge you to contact the CMTI help desk immediately, and you'll find that link to the help desk right on the LMS website. Any other questions related to the website, the functionality of the website, passwords, or anything like that, reach out directly to the CMTI help desk. Webinars will be posted on the LMS, so they will be available for anyone who missed it live. And so if around you, whoever's not there live with you taking it, I urge you to let them know that it will be posted, it will be archived in the learning management system, and we will be reaching out to them to make sure that they take it. We do take attendance at each webinar. If you haven't noticed, attendance is very, very important. In the webinar, we will be reaching out to you to watch it. Again, the learning management system comes directly, we'll email directly from the system for each webinar that you missed. So, for example, you missed 2 events, you're going to be getting 2 reminder emails every so often until you take that. I'm also going to be reaching out to you directly from our partners as well as from the NIAPRS main office. Attending really special for this initiative. This is in the room. We're going to be sending you the PowerPoint from the first face-to-face session. So you asked for that, and we're just a little trying out all the different lists that we have, and once I get a finalized list of everyone that participates in the training, I will send those out personally to you through email. And at some point, we will also post on the learning management system. So you'll actually see that in your curriculum on the system. Watching in a group. I know I've spoken to several of you that you are watching today in a group. At the end of today's presentation, you're going to have the opportunity to enter in everyone's email addresses so that we can document their attendance. At the end of today's presentation, at the end of the webinar, there's going to be a post-event survey, and we really urge you to complete this. It really does help us to get your feedback and, of course, to improve our work. In this presentation, we have 2 wonderful presenters, 2 wonderful people with us today. Jill Martin, there's her picture right there, and Lenora Reed Rose. And so that's Lenora, there she is. And so let's go to Cheryl. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Cheryl is currently the Integrated Health Trainer and Clinical Consultant for the Coordinated Care Services, also known as CCSI. And she works in partnership with the Monroe County Office of Mental Health. And she's been for the past 9 years. She has a nursing, a master's in psychology, and over 45 years of experience as an RN. So holds a KSAT and certificate from the University of Buffalo. Cheryl is a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network Trainers since 2004 and a Motivational Interviewing Assessment Supervisor Tools for Enhancing Proficiency Trainer. Wow. Say that twice. For the NIDA Blending Initiative. She is OASAS certified SC trainer as well. Okay, so Lenora is Director of Linguistic Competence for the Coordinated Care Services Incorporated, and she's also the co-director of the Nathan Klein Center of Excellence in Cultural Competent Mental Health. She has 2 decades of experience in the behavioral health field. Lenore has served as a consultant and educator at the state, regional, and national levels. She has extensive experience developing and implementing cultural competence assessments, training initiatives, and programs. So with that, we're going to begin with Cheryl Martin. Thank you all for your patience to all of my announcements. Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me into your office space. I just spent 5 weeks in New York City training at CUNY, so it's lovely to be back together again. I've been asked to talk about outreach, engagement, and retention as it relates to trauma-informed care and motivational interviewing. And I've come to believe that we understand person-centered care is very important, but for many of us, we're not exactly sure what that looks like or how we can achieve it. And I think that trauma-informed care, where you start to understand people's, what's been driving their behavior, their neuroscience, the things that have happened to them, and also understand motivational interviewing, a conversation style that stays within the limits of what we would call trauma-informed care. In other words, it offers support in a way that people can learn to trust. So that's what I'm hoping that I can impart with you today. So 2 of the objectives that I have is for you to understand the role of motivational interviewing and trauma-informed care in outreach, engagement, and retention, and also to understand some of the skills of MI and trauma-informed care that will support it. What makes outreach important? I'd like you to hold on to that for yourself. This is something we can discuss over time. But some of the things that I think are very important for us to understand is that there is a population in our society that's being ignored and underserved for lots of reasons, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And there's many people who coming to a program or coming into a space that belongs to someone else is very, very difficult, and that we really need to go out to their space to be able to engage them. And sometimes it's the only way that we can maintain a continuity of care, hospital to outpatient, or even any kind of care at all. And many people have barriers to seeking care, and I'll just mention a few of them now, and I'd ask that you think about it yourself. What gets in the way for folks? Sometimes it's the location of clinics, it's the hours the clinics have open, sometimes it's insurance, although that is getting better, fees that they might have to pay that they don't have money for. Sometimes it's our own provider attitudes that for people with trauma histories feel just uncomfortable in our space and don't want to be there. Sometimes they have competing priorities like Maslow's hierarchy. Food and shelter will come first. And sometimes it's just mistrust because they've had experiences in the past where they've been let down or disappointed. So I'd like you to think about and what kind of concerns you have about that. What kinds of things are concerning to you when you think about outreach? And I'm just going to go back to this slide. For me, engagement is fundamental. Engaging the person, having having them stay in treatment is the most important thing we can do, and it's the only way, obviously, we can provide services. So what is this engagement thing? Well, we're person-centered and trauma-informed. That means we understand how people have, what they've been through, and what we can expect when folks have had a lot of toxic stress in their life. Come to the person and go in the space where they're most comfortable, where they feel safe. Sometimes you'll make contact many times before the person engages. After all, when life has let you down a number of times, it's going to take a number of times for you to begin to trust others. Meet the basic needs first, and as I mentioned before, the Maslow's hierarchy. If a person doesn't have housing, if a person doesn't have food, if a person is afraid of others in their life or something in the community, it's very difficult for them to be able to focus on higher level needs. Our own flexibility is very important. In fact, one of the hallmarks of motivational interviewing is our ability to be able to stay open to all possibilities, our ability to tolerate the stress of not knowing what the answer is going to be for someone else. And obviously, how could we know that? Only they know that. And also that you have a team of folks that support you and the person you're attempting to engage. So those folks with whom you work, the other health home care managers, your supervisors, the other people that you'll be working with on teams. So I want to talk a little bit about power and control. Power and control is a very important aspect of trauma, and also something that we view in a very special way with motivational interviewing and in person-centered care. Often when there's been histories of trauma, powerlessness and loss of control will follow. What do you think that does to our professional relationship with the people we serve? What about if we act in a power role or an expert role, or if we take control? What does it say to a person that's experienced a lot of trauma? Do they become powerless again and feel as if they're re-experiencing their trauma? Or it has to sit with the person. I'm going to share some of the power that we've held in the past in healthcare with the person in front of us. We are the expert about whatever topics we know. I might say I'm an expert about motivational interviewing, or I might say I'm an expert about trauma-informed care. But the person who sits in front of me will always be the expert about themselves. Be the expert about themselves and their schizophrenia. They'll be the expert about themselves and their diabetes. They'll be the expert about themselves and the toxic stress they've experienced in their community. They'll always be the expert, and being the expert means that we have a lot to learn from them. Collaboration, cooperation, and negotiation are very important. We will see that people have their voices nurtured in the conversations. That means that we're always discovering this new respect for this person. We will find that we're surprised how much they already know and how much they can contribute to any kind of care that we provide. For us, this means that we have to take risks. We will share more of who we are as a human being and become a real person in the eyes of the person we're serving. One of the things I choose to do is to look at the person's strengths as a way of helping them change. No one changes from the things they don't do well. So you see our little cat here. Today you are you. That's truer than true. There's no one alive who is truer than you. Versus a deficit approach, which really takes the power away from the person in front of us and blames them for where they are. Take that strengths-based approach, where that person is seen as having capacity and ability. When the person experiences that feeling, change can happen. Only in the safety of that relationship, where they believe that we see value in them, where they believe and feel that they have a voice and that it's being heard and that it's important to us. In that space, change can happen, even when we don't have a plan. It's amazing the power of that relationship and that trust. Skill building. And one of the things that happened I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Events. But Dr. Felitti did his study. When it was all done and he recognized the power of the experiences these young people had had, the trauma they'd experienced, the toxic stress they'd experienced, and their survival, he had a saying that he brought with him, and that was, the thing that you and I view maybe as their problem, the public health problem, the behavioral problem, the learning problem, whatever it is, has often been a solution to the person in front of us. It is how they survived. They're still with us. So we need to understand the intent of the person's behavior so that we can begin to value them. How you view the person in front of you will have everything to do with how you treat them. And the behavior is often very complex, and it has meaning to the person. People do not engage in behaviors unless there is some benefit to them for that behavior. All of us, not just the people we serve, all of us. I want to emphasize the skills the person can develop and always be keeping my focus on the future. Obviously, I can't change anything that happened in the past, but I certainly can affirm them for their capacity and for who they are today and the fact that they're there with me and keep our eye on the future. In fact, I'm lending my hope to them until they can find the strength to have their own hope. So growth and change are really valued in a trauma-informed service. This isn't about just keeping people at baseline and keeping their symptoms at a bay. This is about a person growing, becoming stronger and becoming more autonomous and becoming activated. And it's very much valued in trauma-informed service and in motivational interviewing. After all, people have the right to take it or leave it, whatever we have to offer. This is why the relationship is so important. In a relationship of trust, people are more likely to be open to any ideas you have. But one of the important things, and I want to just go back to that, is that often we don't understand that people, or we haven't been given a space to really think about the fact that it is people's right to decide what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. In partnership, can you have any impact on that? And again, only with the things that they care about, what's important to them, what they feel competent in doing, will they respond to us. Intense emotions are recognized as an effort to cope with their trauma history and what's happening today. It's how they survived. It's what protected them. And their desire for safety and the same things we have is really the motivator we want to draw on. We work to keep their environment as safe as possible, and definitely our relationship as safe as possible, so that environment between you and them, as safe as we can, that is a motivator that can help change happen. They also support the development of their abilities to be advocates for themselves. This isn't about fixing folks, because we're only with them for a very short time every day, or any day and any week, and they're out there in that real world surviving, and they have to find that way to advocate and to do the work on their own, or obviously nothing is going to happen. Our language really matters. I have long ago given up calling anybody with diabetes a diabetic. They're a person with diabetes, and they're so much more than their illness. A person with schizophrenia, a person with addiction. If people wish to call themselves an addict, that's their right to call themselves anything they want. But I don't do that. I want to see a whole human being in front of me. So I call them persons receiving services. I prefer not to call it treatment. I call it action plans, because treatment suggests I'm doing something to them. Action plans suggest that they're doing something for themselves. And I talk about their story up to now, or their history, rather than an assessment, which sounds very clinical. So what's happened to you up till now? Can you tell me how those things that happened to you affect the person you are today? That kind of language. And then whatever they do in the progress notes, or whatever we have to call it at our end, it's their change story. It's what they take from that and what they do. So document that negotiation between us and them as a way to demonstrate that we are collaborating and we're sharing expertise. I'm giving you my expertise about diabetes. You're giving me your expertise about living with diabetes that only you can know. You're going to elicit from that person what they want to have happen if they encounter a crisis. And I think most of you have seen this in the RAP plans and things like that. Really knowing ahead of time what would you like to see happen, and restore their power and build their sense of efficacy. When people know they have a say in what's going to happen, it really changes how they feel. So one of the things I want to really recognize and mostly honor is that you are often, as a care manager, between two worlds. You're trying to provide this trauma-informed care that's sensitive to the person in front of you, person-centered, perhaps using motivational interviewing, while also being responsive to a system that's telling you they have needs, processes, concerns, things that they want from you. This is something I've come to say many times in the last few months. The matter is we have absolutely no control over the person in front of us when we're working with somebody. But in the relationship that we build with them, in the activation of them to care for themselves, to be empowered, to do their things, outcomes will follow. What happens when we try to tell people, coerce people, force people what to do? And maybe as you're thinking about your own spouse, your kids, your friends, people often will argue back all the reasons why they're not going to do it. As the patients or people that we serve, really don't like being told what to do, but they love to partner in good, safe relationships and work together with others. So you're really translating between those two worlds. Learn what you can do to deal with the expectations from the outside and build that relationship with the person in front of you. Support each other. Use your group supervision, your group skill building to help everybody feel safe in that environment and feel competent in that environment. Find the excitement within this new way of being and this new purpose. Understanding that this just isn't about getting a treatment plan done or about finding out everything about their history. This is about a human being and their life. And that can be a very exciting approach to take with people. And the experience of working with folks who've become motivated and inspired when you use these skills. So to MI, there are 4 processes that we say are absolutely vital for us to be able to be effective with anybody's change. The first one is engaging, and we've just spent a fair amount of time on why this is so important and how it can be challenged by folks who've had a lot of toxic stress and trauma in their lives. But it's important in every relationship we have that there's a relationship there that feels safe and trusting. The second one is focusing. You have a change if you don't know what that change is that you're trying to get. And that needs to be a collaborative thing between both of you. Evoking means I'm going to be trying to get more information from the person in front of me than I intend to give them. And planning can almost be something that doesn't even have to happen if that engaging, focusing, and evoking happen. Many people go off and start to make change on their own. One of the things I want us to think about, when you look at those 4 processes which have been researched and studied and understood as important, what happens usually in healthcare or human services? People get fully engaged in their first encounter with someone. I'm not sure if they're coming in and answering a number of close-ended questions and perhaps talking about other things that meet the needs of the clinic or the place they're going. I'm not sure that they're being engaged. It's something to think about. And often, are they talking about a plan before we've even figured out what they want to focus on and engage them in that discussion? And writing plans before we've evoked anything from them. I've yet to have the person, when I ask them, what do you want to do with that? That to me, nothing. People will give us something. I might say to a person who has diabetes, and I'll go back to that because I know more and more of you are dealing with that out there. Wow, your hemoglobin A1C was 10.4, and that's a high one, so for those who don't know. And I might say then, what do you make of that? Yet to have somebody with diabetes who understands their disease say to me, nothing. They'll just say, wow, that's high. I want those complications, or something like that. Because they know their own answers. Almost anything we can tell people, they already know. It's not about the knowledge as much as it is the relationship and safety. So, be aware of the power of first impressions. From the moment we are with the person, they are watching our body language, which has the most power. Where our eyes are looking, how our body is, how we are in our stance. Do we look safe? Do we look threatening? Do we look like we care? Look like we really want to be there for that person? And how your actions can support their perception of you and their willingness to work with you. In fact, one of the things we know is that people that have had a lot of trauma in their lives can walk into a room and almost immediately see who is safe and who isn't, who's open to listen to them, who's open to partner with them. They've had to learn that skill to survive. What can we do? Create a space that's safe, remembering trauma-informed care and why we're doing that. A space that's comfortable, a space that's welcoming, and a space that's accepting. For a long time, there's been certain office spaces that look a lot nicer than others in our environments, and you start to wonder, why can it be so welcoming when I go in to get my hair done, and maybe not so welcoming when I go into human service or perhaps even a healthcare space? Why does it feel so different? Not to avoid these traps. Asking too many close-ended questions. Closed-ended questions, yes or no, red or black, whatever the closed-ended question is, that tends to deactivate people. It's, hey, you know what, just give me the information I need from you. I'm not really too interested in anything else that's going on in your head right now. So open-ended questions will get you conversation, and you've got to start to understand who that person is in front of you. Never in too quickly on what to change. There's three things that have to happen for people to make a change. The first one is it has to be important to them, their values, their goals, what they want. We all have different values. So what is our tendency as a caregiver or a person working with someone as a professional is that we are measuring them by the values we hold. And quite possibly, in fact, most of the time, their values are going to be different. And it's going to be important to know what those are. So it has to be important to them. Then they have to feel confident they can do it. And finally, the thing that none of us like is that we have to make that commitment to make the change happen, which is work, right? So going too quickly to that change before we've assessed, what is important to you? What do you care about? What are your values? How confident are you can make that thing different, that you can make that change? And building those things for them so that when the change time comes, they have what they need as a basis to make that change happen. We try fixing it sometimes, finding the problem and telling them how to solve it. Very often people have known their problem for a long time. We all sit on this balance of sustained talk and change talk for every change we're going to make, not just the people we serve, but all of us. And there's a side of us that wants to stay the same. We don't want to diet, perhaps. We don't want to exercise. We don't want to speak any differently to our spouse, whatever it is. And a side of us that wants to change. And always in this kind of precarious balance. One way we talk to people can cause them to go further into staying the way they are. And one way we talk, motivational interviewing, can help us move the other way towards change. And communicating that you're an expert and you have all the answers will certainly be a problem during that outreach and engagement. Engaging is the relational foundation of this, and one of the things that we do in engaging is use open-ended questions, as I just spoke about. Affirmations. The average person does not do too many affirmations in a conversation. We tend to look at problems and things that are wrong far more than we naturally look at what's right. So it's purposeful for me to continually look to see what I can affirm in the person in front of me. Reflective listening is the key skill, probably the most important skill in motivational interviewing. Rather than asking a lot of questions, we try to reflect what we heard and then put those reflections together in a summary. We do this to build rapport, to really deeply understand the person in front of us, and to set the stage to privilege their voice versus our voice. Engaging can take minutes to much longer, depending on the person in front of us. We can tell how we're doing with that. The person in front of me look like they're very comfortable and active in this conversation, or they look uncomfortable, and am I doing all the talking? So understand their values, the connection between their values and their goals. Find out what's most important to them. And there are values exercises which we can provide for you. And we can put that on as something on the wherever you can access this. What is the thing called where they can find this?
LMS.
Pardon me?
The LMS.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll put that on there. Respond with reflections so they can hear it again when you hear their values. What can interfere with our engagement? These are the things about us. The culture of the service that we seek to provide, its design, its procedures, its protocols. Conversations in which we leave the person passive. We've talked about this. How can you activate them? Focus too early on a goal. We talked about that. Trying to persuade them to accept diagnoses or labels. This is very important. It's up to them to find out what they want to call themselves, not for us to tell them. We can work through that over time. If people come to us confused or fearful or angry, that can be a challenge for us. Although what we do next, conversation with them, can either make that worse or make that better. And obviously, informal chatting is not too helpful. So activation of person's confidence and their competence, their confidence and their competence. What do you already do to motivate the people you serve? Think about that. What are you doing right now that helps you help the person in front of you change? Here's what we talked about. Explore what they already know about their own problems. Affirm that person for everything that you can find that they are doing well. Recognize and support their strengths and their efforts. This is us lending our hope to that person. And the sources of competence or confidence. Achievements. Ask them, what have you been able to do? How did you make it through that? That's amazing. How did you stop smoking? Modeling by others and observing others. When they see their peers being successful, that adds confidence and competence often to them. And us letting our hope and supporting their self-efficacy. When we believe they can change, they believe that they can change. So what happens, you'll find that you're very curious. You'll want to really understand this person in front of you. They inviting us to return for another visit, which is very good. I have a friend who's a probation officer that said the first time he did this very well in his office, the probationer asked him when they could come again, which doesn't happen often. A mutually trusting, safe, and respectful relationship that will predict that that person will stay with us and want to do something in life around change. Just whenever you're wondering what this thing is about engagement, think about yourself going into any new situation in your life. What influences whether you go back? Think about it. To a dance class, to a quilting class, to a wrestling match or something, whatever it is that you go to that you want to belong or be part of, what keeps you there and what sets you away from there and makes you decide, not for me? So discord and sustained talk are two things that often in the field of medicine have been called resistance. It's a word that we've totally taken out of motivational interviewing, along with non-compliance, by the way, because we recognize that what's happening is that either the person is not comfortable in our relationship or they just want to stay the same, which, as we talked about before, they have the autonomy to make those decisions. It is their choice and not ours. So discord is about our relationship. Sustained talk is about the behavior or the change. So recognize your role in it. Recognize what's going on. Tune your ear to hear signals of dissonance and know it's important. If people are defending themselves, squaring off against you, interrupting you, disengaging, think about how you're contributing to that and what you can do to make that different. Some of the things that cause it, people might come angry into the relationship. We have influence over what happens next. Trying to label people and make them something that they do not see themselves as. Blaming them for the place they are in their life. How can we respond? We can listen, use complex reflections, simple reflections. If there's any skill that can give us more mileage for the work we do on it, it is reflective listening. Apologizing if we've said something that's been hurtful. Affirming them. Sometimes you just have to shift the focus because the topic is too upsetting at the time for them. Sustained talk is all about the person wanting to stay the same. We talked about ambivalence a short time ago. It's absolutely normal, and we all do it. It can't be recognized unless you know where the changes the two of you want to head towards, obviously. And the more people verbalize or say sustained talk to you, the more they talk themselves out of change. This is really, really important to know. Some of the most recent research in motivational interviewing has found that if you try to make a person change or coerce them to change or tell them to change or try to fix them or give them all the ideas why they should do it, they will start to give you back sustained talk almost every time. And know that the more sustained talk they say, the deeper they're digging themselves into that behavior. It's not necessary or even desirable to look at all the reasons why they might want to stay where they are. So how do we respond to that? Again, reflective responses, straight reflection or simple reflection, amplified reflections, double-sided, and we don't have time to describe all of these, but they're things that we can look into and talk in further as we go into our other sessions. And also emphasizing their autonomy. Yes, it's up to you. It's in your hands. It's your choice. Only you can make that decision. Sometimes reframing it. You're talking about how their wife is nagging them about their drinking. You might say, it's really bothering you right now how you're feeling about your drinking, and on the other hand, your wife really cares about you. So volume control on a radio, we can do something about this sustained talk, want to stay the same, and this discord by how we respond to the folks in front of us. So strategies can you use to engage? Well, compassion, empathy, collaboration. If any of you have a moment to go on YouTube to see Brene Brown, she does something on sympathy versus empathy. It's really cute, doesn't take much time, and it really has a lot of impact around understanding the difference between compassion and empathy and sympathy. Or skills that we just talked about, the open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections. Learning how to dance with the discord and not standing up against it and making it stronger. How can I not react to somebody else's discomfort and their dissonance? So their autonomy, finding out why they'd want to change. What is the desire they have? What do they want? What do they wish for? Their ability. What are the reasons, the cognitive things that make them want to make this change? Where is the emotional, deep down need they have to make a change? using affirmations, and having hope and optimism about the possibility. Okay, so integrating it into your practice as a care manager. If you go alone, you'll go a lot faster, but go together and you'll go a lot further. So what does this say? If you really want the change to happen and to be integrated into this person's life, work with them together at the speed that they can go versus telling them to do it. You'll get that done, but they're not likely to change. So what makes MI important to you? I'd like you to think about that. Just think about how confident you are that you could become confident using it. What would you need to be successful with this? And these are things we can bring to further in other discussions as well. Something to think about. This is a good start, but only a beginning. Workshops give us information, but truly to change any of our behaviors, we need ongoing coaching, support, one might call it supervision, and improving your conversations about change. Thinking about change every time you're having a conversation. That helps you understand what you might say next. If you understand that ambivalence and that balance that I showed you about sustained talk and change talk. How people talk really matters, how people talk about that change. We want to resist the urge of evoking more of the sustained talk, and we want to evoke the change talk. So we don't want to have conversations where a lot of sustained talk and discord is happening. We talked about not fixing it. Listening is our most powerful tool. The expert in front of us is the person that we're serving, and they are their expert. Ambivalence is common. Certainly we all have it, including those of us serving the people in front of us. Engagement really matters, and their needs lead to ownership of change and better outcomes. It's their needs, their motivations that will do that. If your communication style has been directing, here are 3 areas to start making change. Plant your feet firmly in a guiding style, not a directing style where we're telling people what to do, not a following style where we have no direction whatsoever with the person in front of us. Understanding a guiding style where you know where you're headed, but doing it on the expertise of the person in front of you. Focus on engagement because that can always improve outcomes, and understand that information exchange is an art. So if I'm speaking to somebody with diabetes, I say, what do you know about your diabetes? I listen carefully, reflect on it, affirm them. Then I say, do you mind if I share with you your hemoglobin A1C? By the way, I ask permission to do that. So they're still empowered. And then elicit from them what they make of that. So it's simple but not easy. Takes a good deal of practice, working with that spirit of collaboration, proficiency with those ORs and the engagement, recognizing and responding to change talk. That can be a skill in itself, listening and understanding when you hear it. And when you hear it, evoking it and doing something with it and guiding towards a goal. And of course, dancing with discord so we don't create a relationship problem. So as you go forward, some recommendations: read some MI books or articles, get some coaching, particularly in your supervision, both individual and group supervision, self-analysis of your own skills with your supervisor, live observation with feedback from your supervisor and feedback from the persons you serve, because they are your best teacher. What they do in response to you is telling you what you've been doing. I want to just quickly, there was something there with the self-analysis and supervisor feedback that I just wanted to quickly go back to. It's really important when I talked about the fact that we don't have control over making somebody else do something, to recognize that the thing that you do have control over and the thing that your supervisor can work on with you is your skill and your ability to engage and to work with people and to understand the skills of things like motivational interviewing. So thanks very much. I'm going to turn this over to Lenora. And it says here, fundamentally, the answers to our challenges in healthcare relies on engaging and empowering the individual. Lenora.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. And thank you all for being here. That was a very powerful presentation. And I must say it dovetails nicely into what it is I will be talking to you about today. As a matter of fact, Cheryl covered quite a few of the points that I would have covered, so it's making my job so much easier. And she's laid a very, very good foundation in terms of activating or the consumer from a cultural perspective. The topic is still outreach, engagement, and retention, and this is focusing a little bit more so on the consumer and their culture. So today I will talk about the consumer's cultural identity and their value system, and some things that, as an individual who is engaged into the consumer, some things that you need to be aware of, how you can get the consumers to be more culturally activated so you can better engage and you can build that trust and relationship that Sherry spoke about. I mean, each time I heard her say something, I said, aha, that's where we're going. That's what needs to happen. We need to have a trusting relationship with those whom we serve so we can serve them better. This is one of my very, very favorite quotes. America is a melting pot where nothing really got melted. So really what it is, we have created a mixture of ethnic and cultural ingredients of various groups tossed together while we still retain our unique culture. So you throw some tomatoes and some onions and some lettuce into a bowl and you toss them around, you really didn't get one mismatch. What we actually got, we probably have some flavors attached to others, but you can still identify the tomato, you can still identify the onions and so forth. But it's the uniqueness of the flavors that makes us so challenging and yet so fascinating. You know, I think culture just adds a whole different layer once we begin to embrace it and adds an entire different flavor to our life and their relationship building with folks. So I usually want to lay the foundation that we speak of culture, what we're talking about, because I know sometimes we say the word culture, we think, oh, black, white, and we go off into all different things. But I want you to think about it's a way of life of a group of people. It's how people think, the attitudes they have. It's learned, it reflects the tradition that have been passed down from one generation to the next, shaped by factors as proximity, education, gender, age, sexual preferences. It's influenced over time and it can be learned. That is an important factor for us to remember. What is inherent culture is a way of life, and if you think of country affiliation, languages, religious, racial, ethnic group, it's what we refer to mostly as inherent culture. Then we have experiential culture. And from that perspective, we think of work affiliations. So the culture as it relates to clinicians, to teachers, to doctors, to lawyers. We all know that there's a cultural piece to it as well. And very often we tend not to bring that into the therapeutic encounter, but we cannot throw it out the door because the piece of that really bumps up into sometimes the cultural nuances of the individual that we're serving. Experiences like the experience of peers and care coordinators and care managers, sometimes where people live. You people talk about live on the east side, the west side, and so there's some cultural nuance in that space. But pretty much belonging to an experiential group, cultural group, can change because we move around, we change. Professions, if I think of myself, I was a teacher, I then became an accountant, and did all sorts of things, and now I'm doing cultural competence. It all changes over time. Identity being a part of several groups. And that's the piece, I think, or cultural identity that plays a whole, that's so important to us when we're presenting ourselves for services. And I'm going to put myself, I tend to talk about myself because I see myself as a cultural being and someone who wants their culture to be taken into consideration or my cultural identity to be taken into consideration when I'm being given, services are being provided to me. So, for example, it could be a black professional woman. That's very different from saying I'm a black woman. I'm putting myself within a group. Or a mother, a single parent mother, a mother with 10 kids compared to a mother with one child. It's a whole, different things. And a gay person living in the suburbs who works in advertising is very different from a gay person who lives in the city, or if somebody just says, I am a gay person. It all varies, and with each word or each description, adds something to what people are saying. This is how I want to be treated. When you think of consumer cultural activation, we're thinking of how do we get consumers to participate in the care process by sharing with providers of care who we are as cultural beings, and having the provider begin to look through our personal culture and say to them, this is what really matters to me in care. Now, I happen to have a diabetic diagnosis. So when I go for care, I want my doctor to think about that in terms of the care, the conversations that we have. So first, we want to gain an understanding of the cultural identity that really matters to the individual. What is it that I, like Lenora, and believe me, it changes every day, it changes over time. Mm-hmm. So today I may say, oh, I'm a teacher because I still enjoy teaching. I don't teach in the classroom anymore, but I find myself, I'm always teaching and I believe so much in education and helping others to learn, and also for myself to learn. So today I could be a teacher, tomorrow I could be a black mother, it could be many things. So the first step is for the provider to be able to understand who is Lenore presenting today, and what's the cultural identity that Lenore wants folks to understand. Then gaining knowledge, reviewing one's own cultural views. So we need to gain knowledge, and I think sometimes from both perspectives. We're not going to get into the cultural knowledge or the cultural views of the individual providing the care today, but that's very important in terms of your role as care managers, that you begin to look on yourself as a cultural being, what that means, how you will interact with the individual before you or the individual you're engaging with. And the next step we're saying is to your own cultural activation, the responses to the cues that I'm going to share with you later. You're better off being prepared if you're going to present yourself. Like we all know, sometimes I'm not as prepared as I would love to be. But if you have a set of questions that can drive you and help you, then it's best to look on this. Okay, what am I going to be saying today? The doctor asked me, how do I want to be called? Or am I seeing someone else? I need to be in a position to share that information and to be able to have the conversation with my caregivers. And then the final thing is how do we communicate that information to those who are providing care to us? Look at the time that you have everyone. Cultural activation and shared concepts. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know about the health activation. It's something that the PAMS, the Patient Activation Measure, that's been used widely in New York State now. As a matter of fact, all district projects are asked to use that with the clients that are in their network. So we think of empowering the consumer to represent themselves, their cultural values, and it can play a real integral part in service And of course, it increases the cultural competency of the caregivers. The more you know about the individual that's presenting themselves, the more your knowledge base increases. There's a research I was reading over the weekend that came out in one of the health magazines that speaks to the more doctors engage with individuals from diverse backgrounds, the better their results are. So you have doctors, if you're engaging on an everyday basis, just one cultural group, then more than likely the results are going to be very good for that group because you begin to learn. But if you begin to expand your base and engage with people who are different, then every time you engage, you're learning to better able to interact with, engage, and retain those consumers. Information providers should know, of course, about the cultural identity of your consumers. And I would also say your own cultural identity. It's, once we begin to recognize that we're cultural beings as well, it's much easier to accept that others are cultural beings. What culturally matters when receiving care, recovering, and living a valued life in the community. And this is beginning to be more and more important the more we get into district and health homes, because it's not just when the person is sitting before you that matters. You have to think that people come from communities and go back to communities. So you may engage with them for an hour or 2 hours, but on average where they do get better is in their communities. So you have to begin to take that into consideration if we're really thinking about the person recovering. What's the importance of activated cultural, consumers' cultural activation, and what is it that the clinicians should know or what the caregivers should know? A lot of times, one of the things that we're thinking that folks should be doing cultural assessments, very often it doesn't happen. So we have to make sure we encourage the consumers in a way so they can share who they are. And the other piece that we won't get into today as well, but just the way Cheryl, in Cheryl's motivational interview and conversations with you, is how do you accept what the consumer is saying? Because very often that's the big piece that's missing. A consumer will say to us, this is who we are. Like, I would like to be called Lenore. Today I want to be called Mrs. Reed Rose, or something else. Or today, I got up this morning, I really feel a little off because I don't know, I dreamt that I saw my mother last night or whatever it is. You're not hearing me. You won't accept my truth. And what it is that we're saying that if you begin to employ the motivational interview with the cultural competence, it begins to be so much easier to engage individuals who are very different, and you find ways to solicit and elicit that information, provide feedback, like Cheryl said, elicit, provide, elicit. It's that thing. You're getting from the consumers who they are, and they're sharing with you, and you're using that information to begin to engage and retain them. What the cultural activation prompts, they were founded in medical anthropology, DSM-5, cultural formulation, provider interview, and they're also consumer input. Think of from the medical anthropology perspective, and Arthur Kleinman, he's one of my favorite guys, because he has this explanatory model, which I think anyone who is providing care should be aware of his work. You don't have to go very far to begin to use what he has up there, and I always suggest that people really go back and read and understand what he's saying. And he, Hansen came up with some of the work that he did and spoke about the cause, and cure, and course. So, like Cheryl spoke about the cause. What do you call the illness? How do you describe it? Because I'm, when I didn't tell this Cheryl, but I also have high blood pressure. So it's another thing when we're presenting together, you can add that to your list of examples. So
I did it.
I know. So, what do you call it? Sometimes a man say, my head is hurting me. If my head isn't hurting me, I may say my blood pressure is very down today. But they probably baloney, but you need to know as my caregiver, that's what I'm calling and describe it when I have an intense headache. I'm thinking my blood pressure is high, or when I don't have a headache, it may be okay, and I may even stop taking the medicine because I hate taking tablets. So I may just decide, oh my gosh, this is off. What causes it? I may say, I came to work yesterday and so I bumped my head, and that's what's causing it. And if my cause isn't connecting with the cause that Cheryl, the caregiver, is going to be giving, telling me if I can't accept or we can't come with some way to begin to say, okay, where we're disconnecting, then I'm going to be very off. Because somewhere, somehow, we got to bridge the two. You have to be willing to hear what I'm saying. I need to find a way to begin to understand what you're saying so I can get great outcomes. So that's how the motivational interview really comes in, because you're using those skill sets to elicit from me and to use what I'm giving you to then begin to help me to get to where I need to go. It's never a one-way stream. And, Cheryl spoke about the power. And, I'm big on a lot of times we are in these positions of power as caregivers, as clinicians, as, we know it all. And sometimes I even put myself in there, too. I think I know it all. And very often, we don't know it all. We need to be opening ourselves to learn from others and then to begin to shape our knowledge base and how we behave and respond very differently. The DSM-5 cultural formulation, and in the DSM-5, I think they've gone into so much more detail on what it is that clinicians should be doing in embracing or including an individual's cultural being into the service therapeutic encounter. And it falls back just what Kleinman, a lot of Kleinman's work was used in coming up with the DSM-5 formulation, the definition of the problem, the perception of the cause, the context and support, the factors affecting self-coping, health-seeking, current health-seeking treatment and preferences. An individual needs to know that information because it is those things that will help to shape the engagement, shape the way the plan of care, and shape how services are going to be delivered to an individual. And of course, in coming up with the prompts that I'm going to share with you later, there's a lot of consumer input. We from different advisory committees. We had a few consumers, quite a few different consumer groups gave input, and we had peer specialists review the prompts as well. The prompts are a set of 15 cues for, as I said before, consumers, patients, individuals, to use to convey information to their caregivers on what culturally matters to them in receiving care. So I define care very broadly. So some people may think of care being the doctor or the psychiatrist or whomever it is. I define care as anybody who's engaging with me. That's the person. My care manager may not be dispensing medication, but the engagement is care that will help me in a way to get the other service I need. So as care managers, this becomes ever crucial because what you understand about the consumer at this level, it will make it so much easier for you to engage with them and to help your consumers engaging with others. So the cultural activation prompts, we call it CAPS. So a section it covers a cultural identity, which, as I said earlier, it speaks to race, ethnicity, country, where you're from, gender, educational level, sexuality, faith, religious affiliation, and gets into the cultural view of the mental health challenges, what we call it, what caused it, stigma, and yet again, there is trauma. Trauma is very important. Cultural supports and stressors, where do you get those from, the supports from, and what stresses you out as an individual and recovery. What does it mean to you and from your perspective? So it's beginning to understand all those things and from the consumer's cultural perspective. So I think of cultural group identity. The consumer will be telling the caregiver how do they identify themselves. And it could go from, being a second generation Latino engineer. It could be an immigrant from Russia. And it could be a black person. It could be a mother. It could be anything. Those are examples. Very often I would identify myself as a mother because that's very important to me. And although my daughter is 29 years old, I am still a mother, and I don't let her forget it, and neither do I. So it's very, very important to me. People will call me Keisha's mother, so most folks around me, they do know that I identify myself with my P identifies from a cultural perspective. The view of the mental illness, we went through cause. There's the cause, stigma, and trauma, and I won't go into, because Cheryl did a lot on the trauma, a lot on the cause. I did some as well. But just to remember that from a cultural perspective, it is very different. So what's traumatizing in some cultures is not necessarily traumatizing in others. It's normal. And sometimes, many times for individuals of color, the trauma has been so normalized, they're not even understanding, and as a caregiver, you need to understand that. And even at times when it's presented, you need to accept it. Now, don't minimize it. You need to accept that's the person's truth. And back to what Cheryl said, illicit, provide illicit. It's for you as the care manager or the clinician to then dig deeper to figure out what is really going on with this individual. Individuals, what you call them. You have what you call the illness, but also what you call them. It's very important to people from different cultural groups. And most individuals find that you're being disrespectful if you don't call them the way they want to be called, and that could just shut someone down. So instead of engaging, then you just close that engagement, it's shut down, and you get nod heads and you get, okay, and in my head, I'm just dying to leave. Look on my time, when will I get out of here? I need to get on because the person was already being disrespectful to me. And, I'm from Jamaica, and, it was very surprising to me when I got here. I thought I was very savvy. But, people called each other by their first names. It didn't matter how old you were. For me, it is used to say Miss, Mr., and Mrs., and it took me a while in the workplace to say, like somebody who we're consulting with them called by their first name. I thought it was a little disrespectful. Now it rolls off my tongue like nothing. I don't even think twice about it. It just happens. I say Harvey, I say Edie, not Mr. Rosenthal. It just rolls off. So, time, place, like I said earlier, does change things. But earlier, people look like, what is going on with? I'm saying to myself, how disrespectful are they? So we need to begin to understand that's how the name, how they address individuals is very important from different cultural groups. What do you call the reason why you're seeking care? People have different reasons for it. When I think of my culture thing, it could be, for me, a lot of times, it could be because I feel I've been discriminated against. I was not given the promotion I thought I needed. I was kicked out of the church choir. I was at maybe a social event. There are many things that could drive. And later I'll share my own cultural card with you. Causes. What cultural group thinks might be the causes of you needing care? And that's important. Now, it's important not just what I think, but what my group thinks. If my group is usually my support, it's the people who I rely on. They give me, and if they're calling it something, then you need to know, because when I go back to my group, that's why it's an important thing about community and how people engage within their communities. When I go back to my community, they think it's bad karma. Well, I'll tell you, it is bad karma. And it didn't matter what you just said to me or what conversations we had. You need to understand that when I go back, that's what I'm going to be hearing. That probably could be conflicting with the conversations that we already had. And just be hanging around that, well, that's huge in some cultural groups. I may be hanging around with the wrong crowd, because a lot of groups says who you hang around with is who you are. So if I'm hanging around with folks who are sinners, I'm a Christian, or I'm in the church, or I'm very religious, you need to understand that is what I think, and my group thinks is my problem. Stigma. The CAPS also faces and understand that there's stigma from different cultural groups, how people see or define the mental health challenges they have. It could be seen as shame or disgrace. Then, as a result of that, you delay seeking help, and your feelings of being insulted or being treated rudely, feel unwelcome, unwanted, and not valued. So that delays care a lot of times from a lot of cultural groups. So if you have someone and you know that's a part of their culture, as a part of what the group thinks, and when I present myself for services, and you begin to call me Lenora when I want to be called Mrs. Reed Rose or Miss Lenora, then you just turn me back. I won't be back, because you just shut me right out. I've taken a lot of effort to come to you for services, and now there you're going to call me Lenora? Oh, no, I don't want to be disrespected like that. So I will just go back to my community or to my family and continue. Like I said before, Cheryl went into a lot of the trauma. Each time she said something, I said, okay, ditto. I want to jump and say, okay, ditto, because it is so important. And the way trauma is experienced among cultural groups, well, I keep saying that, it is very, very different. And we need to acknowledge it, not minimize it, embrace it, and accept that that's the person's truth. Some of the stresses and supports that are embraced within the CAPS, we think about what supports the individual might get from their cultural group. That's important to know, because it's very, very different from cultural group to the next. So somebody may, accompany them to the clinic, may prepare their meals, may come in and take care of the children. When I'm ill, like I was ill last year, I had a major health challenge, and I called my folks in Jamaica, and the next day there was somebody, my aunt came out to take care of me and my household. So I know, so even as going home, the doctors would say, what help do you have? Because they knew where I was from, and I pretty much didn't have much family members here. I said, I'm going to be cool, because my aunt is here. And says, oh, okay, so she'll cook and do da-da-da-da-da. So, sometimes, and not a lot of us have that opportunity. So we need to understand as caregivers, what's going on, what supports are there. And it's not that my family came, my friends came. I have my extended family here, so it was just my blood relative. I need to acknowledge that, just in case they're listening. Don't want to discuss that. My friends were there as well. One moved into the hospital with me, so the entire time I was in the hospital, she was there, and they were all over. So I just want to make that put that out. So what stresses your cultural group place on you for care? And that is so important. Because if you're seen as weak, back to the community, back to the folks, your cultural group, if they're seeing you as weak, and they know, so you may have to hide to go get care. Can you imagine you're mentally stressed out, and you have to be hiding because your cultural group is going to be thinking that you're weak. So knowing that is then how you engage with that individual. If I'm sharing that with you, don't poo-poo me. You need to accept it because I may have to wear a cap and sunglasses when I'm coming to your place in the middle of the day. You know, I don't know if people do that, but still, just understanding from the cultural group what they see as how they interpret illness, or that could place additional stress on an individual who is seeking care. How you cope with it is very important. A lot of folks are spiritual folks, they're religious folks, participating in community groups. For me, it's join some civic thing or playing dominoes with my friends, or you know, I don't play spades. My friends tell me that they are going to teach me, and I will be playing spades at the end of 2016. So we'll see. But it's engaging in whatever you engage that you use as a coping mechanism. It's important. It's very different. 10 minutes left? Oh, Lord. What views or values or cultural group that might interfere with the improvement? A lot, I'll move off the slide, but one of the takeaways that I'd love you to do is that it is very important to recognize the individual that you are serving is not by themselves. They live, they work, they play, and they're from communities. We have to engage sometimes in communities to begin to understand. When we think of district and what's happening, community population health and community health is very important. Actually, one of the projects that all districts have to do, because you have to engage. You cannot not engage with the community where folks are from. And what kinds of treatment, advice, or healing, use herbs, spiritual counseling. I use a lot of herbal teas. I drink a lot of teas. I believe in their essence and what they do for me. Moringa is one of my favorite ones, that I think it cures everything. So if that's my belief, then it needs to be accepted and it needs to be integrated. What attitudes I have towards treatment that are common in cultural group and have got in my way of seeking help. That's important. Back to what the community feels, back to what my group, my cultural group is thinking. So when I tell you my cultural identity and my affiliation with the groups, you may not know offhand what that is. So I will share some information with you, and you also need to go out, read, to help to build your knowledge base. So I will help you build, but you also need to take responsibility for your own education as well. And by my cultural views and expectations of recovery, what is it that from a cultural perspective I'm looking for? It may not be to return to work. It may not be to get off my meds. I may be fine with my meds. I may go to work, but that's not my thing. My big thing may be I want to go back on the church choir. You love to be there singing praises, clapping hands, and going on every Sunday morning. That may be my thing. And if that is my thing, then that's the thing that you need to include. Not to negate the other stuff, but you have to include that, and you have to make me feel that is a big part of what you're thinking as it relates to me. So the cues. The 15 cues, and you will get the slides, so you will see them. What would you like to be called, the kind of person you would like to get care from, the different cultural groups, cultural identity, any negative or traumatic experiences, the names given by persons in the group, what persons from the group you culturally identify with may think, be the cause of you seeking care, why you think you need care. All these cues, what we're saying that and when the consumer presents themselves that way, by responses to these cues, then it's incumbent upon you to begin to accept whatever conversation they give to you and to use that information into care. And personally, even if they don't say it, your perspective, you need to be asking the consumers these questions. You need to be helping them to say, you know what, it's okay, I accept it, it's okay, I want to hear it. Because that's the way, by hearing it, that's the way I'm going to build this trusting relationship with you. And trusting relationship is huge. I could probably answer most of these things from people who I trust and I consider a trusting relationship with, because it's conversations we think are important, and it doesn't matter if it's just receiving care or building a relationship for friendship. How to use, we've gone over that, and here's some of my, I'm going to go to my responses. I identify myself as Black, as a Jamaican American, as a mother. Some of my causes, I think I've been discriminated against at work. I've been passed over for the president of the Snow Club. Oh my gosh, that was so important to me. I have experienced racism. I've been called ugly names. You know, what do I call, peers, my friends, or when call what I have, crazy, madness. Some people say nerviosa and Spanish. This is important for me, for my caregiver or folks to know about me. Who would I call? My first responses would be my cousin, who lives in Jamaica, my best friend in Atlanta. My daughter lives in Seattle. If you think about I live in Rochester, and all those folks are in Rochester. So my caregiver needs to understand and know that. Here's Moringa tea. I can't do without it. And then, another thing, if I say there's something in Jamaica where we sort of relief, you tie on your head. In the olden days, if you think you had a headache, I would see in my grandmother's days they would have this thing, and the whole idea is, it's sometimes I laugh at it, but my cousin, the doctor, explained the whole idea was that the sweating and the heat would put out the medicinal properties out of whatever it is, because a lot of a lot of medicines are made from herbs. So that was the way that people did it. It did, because it would pull out the medicinal properties out of it. And here is part of my cultural card. I want to be called Lenora. I want to be identified as Black, Jamaican American. Trauma, discriminated at work, racism in social settings, and called ugly names. And individuals from my cultural group, my daughter will help. However, talk to my cousin, my best friend. Crazy, drinking moringa tea. And that is it. Did I get within 10 minutes? Thank you. Thank you so very much for listening and giving me the opportunity to engage with you. I think, is it not questions and answers, or what is it?
We're checking to see if there are any questions that people have.
I didn't see any questions come in other than logistical questions regarding the website and just wanting us to make sure that we're taking proper attendance of large groups together. Have you seen anything else?
No.
All right, guys, you reached the time, and we had a lot of wonderful information sent our way today by the two lovely ladies. And so if you have questions, please use the question and answer box now. While you're doing that, I actually can just do some final announcements.
So there's one question that just came in. How do you get the provider to buy into CAP since they're so short with time?
I think very often I get that question a lot. Folks not just to buy CAP, but also to ask the right questions. And I think it's just beginning to think about doing work differently. So you can spend a little more time up front and less time on, because if you do not know the patient well, then whatever you're dispensing, it will not be in accordance with who that patient is. And as such, the patient will take a longer time to recover, or may just not recover, or may end up in the ED because the things that matter most we're not taking into consideration. So really thinking about the person, thinking about recovery, thinking about their outcomes, and we begin to tool the way we engage very differently, I think it will not take that much more time.
You know, and something, this is Cheryl, something I'm thinking about. When we talked about the engage, focus, evoke, and planning, I try to treat the people I work with, in other words, the doctors or the same way I treat the person that I'm serving. So I understand that they come with their trauma, they come with their issues, and so I'm going to try to figure out what they care about, what's important to them, and what they feel pretty confident about to help them change behavior, because they're just as often.
And I think like everyone else, we doctors or whomever it is providing care will need to have conversations around this as well. So it's not just saying, oh, here, you need to figure out how do you do the motivational interviewing? What do you need? What's important to you to have with your patient or from your patient to provide the care? And, you know, we just have to have that kind of conversation.
There's another question. Do you think a comprehensive assessment is the best method to start an engagement?
Oh, so Cheryl here again. I can tell you some feedback I've had from folks in the community, and I will be very forthright about that. I've had one person who sought help in a mental health clinic and called me both times she went in to say that she had nothing but closed-ended questions and financial people that met with her. And by the time she'd finished the second appointment, which was the finishing of the assessment, she decided treatment was not for her, and she went to a peer group in the community. Actually, she's doing very well. But the point is, I think we have to get information. We have to be creative about how we do it. So what I usually do is start out by asking them to tell me their story, and I get as much information out of that as I can, and I jot it down. I get permission from them. Do you mind if I just jot some things down that are really important? And then at some point I say, do you mind if I ask you some questions that I absolutely have to get the answers to? Would that be all right with you? And people always say yes. So they have control, right, Nora?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And for me, the comprehensive assessment is probably, I don't know if you say comprehensive by length or assessment or how many pages or how many questions. I think we need to figure out what questions must be answered. And we may not necessarily get all the answers at the first setting, because sometimes, back to, you build the relationship. And when you build that trusting relationship, then you will know at what is the best time to get the information that you want. But some information is very, very critical that you get. A friend of mine who is Greek, she and her husband are very, very Greek. Husband went recently to the hospital here locally, and she was looking on the forms, and she's in the healthcare field as well, and they wrote him down as Latino. Now, nobody asked the question, nobody whatever, but in the form, and this is a part of his comprehensive assessment, and it's going along with him, and they're looking on each other like, why are people asking me some of these other questions? Because somebody wrote down he's Latino, and then when she read, says, oh, honey, you are Latino. No wonder they're asking you these questions. It's kind of funny when we laugh about it, but the person is trying to get the information but not asking the questions. Now, that is a question that you need to ask up front, so you can begin to shape things. But all questions don't need to be asked and answered at the first encounter.
And I think as we get better and more sophisticated with our documentation and our shared documentation, a lot of these kind of one answer, very important, absolutely, but they don't change. If I was Latino yesterday, I'm probably Latino tomorrow, and if I was Greek yesterday, so, I mean, this kind of thing that we can start to not have to ask a lot of things that are already there in the record. I think that's the most frustrating thing for people, is answering the same questions 10 times to 10 different people.
Cheryl and Lenora, this is Ruth. I just thank you so much for sharing your wonderful information, sharing not just knowledge, providing us a pathway to gain those skill sets and not bog down our work, but instead enhance our work and really be able to engage folks. So thank you so much for sharing of yourself that way. One more question. Actually, several people had questions about receiving copies of the presentation, the PowerPoints from today, and we will absolutely do that. What we're going to do is upload them onto the learning management system. So at some point soon, you will see that link on your curriculum in the learning management system. I need to repeat, if you haven't taken the pretest, we urge for you to do that. And once you do that, then we can actually start uploading the PowerPoints and as well as the presentations today. Activity is for the supervisors, and that is the Supervisor Learning Collaborative Call, which, by the way, funny enough, we do by webinar, and that is on April 19th. And so there are several ways, as you see right here on this slide, reach out to us. The first one is mine, and then there's Diane over at NYCCP, and Nancy Cowell over at the Center for Practice Innovation. What we do not have here, and what I really would like for you to do is if you ever find that you have questions regarding the website, please reach out to the CPI Help Desk, and that link will be on that website. Our partners at the New York Care Coordination Program, the Center for Practice Innovation, New York State Council for Community Behavioral Health, and the Coalition of Behavioral Health Agencies in New York City. Thank you all, to all of you, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Take care. Have a great day.